Hello everyone and welcome to the pre-alpha of Black Ops 2. Recently I did a video on this build of 25 dev tricks and secrets outside of this pre-alpha, and since then I've gotten in touch with one of the people working on the build and have learned a bunch more information about it, and I'd like to share that with you all today. Also, yeah, that is a beta version of Mob of the Dead. We'll get to that in just a moment. So if you enjoy any of this, consider leaving a like down below. It helps me out a ton, and of course make sure you subscribe so you can come back for more. But without further ado, let's get into it. The first thing I want to talk about is the date of this build, which I do have some actual dates now, which in retrospect I probably should have had for the Dev Tricks and Secrets video, so sorry guys, but you know, everyone makes mistakes, I suppose. And the truth is this build is actually two separate builds put together. There seems to be two separate sets of leaked files, and in each of these set of leaked files we had a different variety of maps. For the first build, we had Mob of the Dead, Nuketown Zombies, Transit Town Survival, as well as Transit Diner, which I'm pretty sure is returned. And of course, the beta version of Origins, which we've shown before on this channel. Some really cool footage from that. And for this first build, as far as I know, everything is release ready other than the beta Origins. And I do have a date for that beta Origins. Its last edited date was June 11th, 2013. And just for some reference, that puts this between the release of Mob of the Dead and Buried, with Mob of the Dead releasing on April 16th, 2013, right around 2 months before the date of this build. But in that Dev Tricks and Secrets video, of course, we also had the alpha version of Buried, and it was really cool to see, but it was much less finished than Origins was. And, of course, well, it's because that was from a separate build, and had a completely different date associated with it. In the second build, we had the DLC 5 maps, Mob of the Dead, once again, a redundancy, which is interesting, and also Alpha Buried. This build was much earlier in development, and the date for Buried was February 14th, 2013, which places it before the release of Mob of the Dead even, and a whole 4 months before the date of that beta Origins build that we've seen. And because of that, in this second set, Mob of the Dead isn't finished either, although it does have a different date than the Buried Alpha, being roughly a month after the Buried Alpha and a month before the release of Mob of the Dead, with a last edited date of March 13th, 2013. So just as a quick summary, because that was a lot of dates, you can see them all on your screen right now, we had essentially two separate sets of leaked files, and I had absolutely no idea that that was the case before this, so I want to give a huge thank you to Heaventh for reaching out to me and giving me all this information, and a huge thank you to all of you for your support on the channel, because I do have one more thank you to give, and it is because of all of you guys, and that is to ExitLag for sponsoring today's video. ExitLag is a gaming optimization tool that revolutionizes solutions tailored for gamers like us. It addresses server issues and provides dedicated routes, ensuring a seamless and lag-free experience. To achieve this, ExitLag uses AI that can find the best routes for data packets in real time to over 2,000 game servers worldwide. And yes, that includes Call of Duty, and even the older titles such as Black Ops 2, where ExitLag can ensure a smooth and responsive gameplay experience. You can get rid of those frustrating lag spikes that cause you to go down on round 20 and enjoy seamless gameplay. In order to make sure those packets get to where they need to go, ExitLag routes data through up to 4 different paths to ensure a faster, safer, and fail-safe delivery. It's as easy as creating an account, downloading ExitLag from their website, and then clicking install. From there, you just sign in, choose your game, and you can get access to lag-free gameplay instantly. And with the holiday season coming to a close, ExitLag is offering 50% off on the annual plan when using code AWESOME at checkout. So whether you're a solo gamer or would like to split the bill with up to 4 other players with the squad annual plan, the season is one for smooth gameplay. But this is a holiday special and it ends very soon, so click the link in the description or the pinned comment below to support me as well as your gameplay. And thank you once again to ExitLag for sponsoring today's video. Now, before we get to covering the pre-release version of Mob of the Dead, there are a few things that I didn't get to in the Dev Tricks and Secrets video that I want to cover right now. One of the big ones is about the trenches leading to Gen 3, which in that Dev Tricks and Secrets video, I only had limited footage of, and we had this little overhead view of it. We could see that there was a ramp here next to where the Semtex wall buy is in the release version that led up towards that footprint where the staff piece is. Well, now we have a much more detailed video for it. So the first thing is, yes, this ramp exists in the build, however, it's covered up with rubble. And at this point, although it hasn't yet been removed from the map, it has definitely been cut. But we can see it has full collision, and you could walk up to this sort of elevated area here above the trenches. And I'm really unsure where this was supposed to lead to, however, my guess still remains that you were going to get to that staff part from here. And it's been blocked up by some debris, and you can no longer access this pathway. And we can see that in this version of Origins, the little bridge leading towards that wooden structure that you jump onto from the tank already exists. And I would imagine that this is the reason that this ramp was cut. And there are a few small changes here, but one of the more notable ones is that there was a drop down right where the staff piece is, which, funny enough, is pretty much in the exact same location. But this drop down would have put you right in front of the Semtex, and I suppose that wouldn't have made a lot of sense if there wasn't going to be a ramp here. And instead, that drop down was moved to right next to where the bridge is, and this sort of barbed wire fence has been broken down and gives us an area to drop back down into the trench. And just for comparison, in the release version, this ramp is completely gone, and in its place is a bunch of rubble, some models here of these wooden fences, and of course, a model of the tank. It seems that ramp has just been cut away, and in its place is an entire another trench, which does have collision, but the collision stops right at the end of it. And interestingly enough, in the alpha, these trenches here outside the map have collision. You can walk through all of them, which really makes me wonder if these were going to be playable area at one point. And maybe this area was just going to be much larger, perhaps even before Generator 2 was created, and the whole tank system and all of that stuff. I really would love to one day even get an earlier version of Origins, because there's a lot of questions to have here. But either way, it is insanely cool to see this space. And that ramp situation is one that I never thought I would see before. And now the next thing I want to cover is actually in the spawn. Here in the release version of Origins, there are these two doors on either side of the spawn room. They're blocked off by various debris, and if we go through this one, for instance, we'll find a trench that does have collision, we can walk all the way through it, and of course this was used for the intro cutscene of Origins, where our four characters sort of converged here on the spawn room, and I believe these are the trenches that were used for that. For this other one that has the Wonder Fizz in front of it, if we go through it here on the release version, there is absolutely nothing on the other side. But interestingly enough, in the pre-alpha, this was a window location. And it had a whole other trench and quite a large area, actually, which is really cool to see. Especially since I think this trench was cut from the map altogether. Even though there is a window location here next to it, the trench is quite a bit different. It's way smaller. So the trench in this area that we see in the alpha has been completely removed. But nevertheless, I thought it was really cool, but it's time to head on over to Mob of the Dead, to the beta version of the map, to check out its differences with the release version. And since this is only about a month before its release, it's not all that different from the release version, but there are some really cool things to talk about, especially that Golden Gate Bridge, but we'll get to that in a second. First of all, you'll notice that there's like Origins snow going on constantly, and that's because there are quite a few issues with this build. It was explained to me as a mismatched patch file, and it would make a lot of sense that leaked files aren't going to exactly be perfect. So, yeah, don't mind the snow for now. That obviously wasn't supposed to be there in Mob of the Dead, although I suppose it could be possible they were using this to just stress test the map. That could make a lot of sense, actually. Also, we'll find some weird things like all of the headsets from the Easter egg being found just around the map. They're not interactable though, they're just the models floating in air where they would be found normally in the Easter egg. We can also find the blue skulls, funny enough, one of them just being right there inside the warden's office. And this, I imagine, is because the scripts are not working properly in this build, and the models are sort of just left behind as an artifact. But besides these differences that don't really have to do with Mob of the Dead itself, there are some other things to talk about. One of them being this model here for the code selector is quite different in the beta, and it's also been moved to the side as well. And the cage in front of the counter isn't there either, although the warden's key that would be used to open it was definitely in this build. So it could be the case perhaps that that is why this model was iterated upon. But for instance, we can see the map of Mob of the Dead that has the different locations for the plane parts, and this map is exactly the same as it is in the release version. Well, except for the color, actually it was made a little bit more grayscale, and I'm guessing this was so that we could see that red text a bit better. But in the top still, in this beta version, you can see Warden's Key and the two question marks of where it would be. It's really cool seeing an early version of this model. I suppose they just sort of iterated on it just a bit more before release, because again, this was only 1 month before the game came out to all of us. Well, I suppose all of us on Xbox, because this was back when Xbox had exclusivity rights. Man, it's crazy how things come full circle, isn't it? And as far as I can tell, one of the last changes that was made between the build and release was this vault meter here. In the beta version, it just simply doesn't exist at all. The cell here containing the double points power-up is not present. And this is the case even though there are other ones in the map. For instance, the one here in the spawn room that you need to go into the afterlife and through a little invisible door to be able to zap it. So the concept did exist, and I guess just right towards the end of development, they were like, let's just add a couple more of these. They're pretty cool. And honestly, great choice. I think they're awesome. But other than those changes, really only the other differences is in detailing. This can be seen very well in the Hell's Retriever room, where all of these models here on the ceiling with the dead bodies and the spikes, well, none of them exist here in the beta version. And all the writing on the walls seems to be pretty much missing. This goes to show that in the last month leading up to the release of Mob of the Dead, detailing and art design and all of those little bits of iteration were still going on. And it's a good thing too, because this Hell's Retriever room is quite impactful in its current state, and I don't think it would have hit the same if it didn't have all of this detail. But this isn't the only one. Another example of this can be found in the Warden's office, where a ton more detailing was added to make this place more creepy, and one of the big ones being these red windows. In this beta version, you could see out of them clear as day, but of course in the release version, that is not the case whatsoever. They added a whole bunch of papers here, which seem to be pictures of Alcatraz actually, as well as this red blood stain here on the windows, which looks insane when you no-clip outside the map. It's something that really pulls together this Warden's office, and also changes the lighting in general, and makes this eerie feeling even that more eerie. But that is pretty much it for the main area here of Mob of the Dead. Although there's some very simple things like a switch next to the gondola that doesn't exist in the release version, I suppose maybe they were going to use this as a method of calling the gondola between places and decided, just have the player walk up to the thing. But other than some somewhat simple things like that, there's nothing else on the island itself that's really all that important to cover. However, if we fly underneath the water and go all the way to the Golden Gate Bridge, well, it turns out that the layout of this bridge was completely different in this version of Mob of the Dead, just a month before the map's release. This one blew my mind. There was a ton more playable space here on the Golden Gate Bridge, including an area that was behind the electric chairs. Which, if we look at the release version, well, this area is just a broken part of the bridge that's under construction. None of that area exists anymore. In fact, there's not even collision here. But that's not the only thing that's different, as there was even these little pathways on either side of the bridge to these slightly elevated positions that you could use to go around the beams themselves. And on the other side of the bridge, you could go all the way past the crane. There was a whole loop there. Which, of course, here in the release version, the crane itself is the end of this side of the bridge. And as far as those pathways, well, I mean, they're kind of here still. It's just that there's no panels on top of them anymore that you would normally walk on. And most of it doesn't have any collision. However, I did find in some very specific locations, there is some collision left over, which is really cool to see. And lastly, it seems the Pack-a-Punch has moved slightly as well. Although, obviously, the Golden Gate Bridge was always going to be for the Pack-a-Punch, originally, it was right up against the side of the bridge, next to a ramp that led up to the side of the bridge that was playable space in this version. And it's actually quite funny, because the model that was used for the ramp is still here. It's just vertical now instead, and it's super cool to see that it seems like the developers just took it, made it vertical, and called it a day. But in the release version, of course, the Pack-a-Punch is right here, so I suppose it really didn't move all that far. Not a huge change, exactly. I think the overall layout of this place being different and a whole bunch more playable space on either end of the bridge is probably quite a bit more of a change. And oh my god, is it awesome to see, man. I absolutely love this stuff. And I sort of wonder why they ended up changing this. Because this layout here of the bridge, I mean, it seems perfectly adequate. I don't really get it, actually. I do have one theory, though, and that is that it might be related to the Easter egg. as the last step of the Easter egg on Mob of the Dead is a 1 versus 3 fight here on the Golden Gate Bridge. And in that fight, the player who is playing as Weasel, the person who is alone in that battle, well, he's ignored by zombies, while the other 3 aren't. And it could be the case that the developers wanted to make this Golden Gate Bridge harder for those who had to avoid the zombies, in order to sort of balance this ending a bit more and make it more possible for Weasel to win, if, you know, your teammates were actually trying to kill you and not get that ending on purpose. It also might have to do with Brutus's pathing, or perhaps just the zombie spawns in general. As we can see in the current version of Mob of the Dead, well, the zombies quite literally fly up through this area. So the zombie spawns, at the very least, had to be different if this was going to be the playable space. In all honesty, I'm sort of disappointed that we didn't get this, because this Golden Gate Bridge layout is really cool, dude. But at the same time, I suppose it's basically the same anyway. It doesn't really change the map all that much. I just wish I knew why they got rid of it, I suppose. It would just be really cool to learn the history of it, because at the end of the day, these builds are history. This is how these maps, some of which are hailed as the best zombie maps of all time, were made. And it gives us a peek into the development, which is essentially the history of their creation. I absolutely love it, and I wish that Activision, Treyarch, or whoever is responsible for it would leak more of these builds on purpose. I think the zombies community loves it, and obviously we'll see things that are cut, and people will be like, ah man, I wish we had that, and of course, right? But somehow that makes it even more special, and I'm not sure how to explain that, but maybe you guys agree with me, maybe you don't. Let me know down in the comment section, but for now, that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, consider leaving a like down below. It helps me out a ton, and of course, make sure you subscribe so you can come back for more. If there's anything else on these leaked files to cover, you bet I will be doing it here on the channel, as well as, of course, any others that end up coming about in the future. If you want to watch more of my content, you can click one of the videos on your screen right now, but if not, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Stay awesome, and peace out.